So, as I was saying, welcome to this session. It is a great pleasure for us to share information about this W4P call from the La Caixa Foundation. First of all, I'd like to analyze the index about the different sessions we will have today. First, I'm going to make a short introduction about the international area of the foundation, our main programs. We will also have Marta Sulsona, who is in charge of the W4P program, who will be introducing the program and about this called for 2025. Then we will listen to Laura Fernandez, who is an international expert who will talk to us about the strategy of investment for impact, which is one of the main legs of this call. And then we will devote some time for Q&A to clarify any doubts and any questions you may have on the calendar. So please introduce any questions you may have in the chat box. As I've said beforehand, I'd like to point out the four principles or fundamental values we have here, which is what defines the W4P program nowadays. First of all, trust, active listening, and trust in, listening and co-creation based in the local culture as a driver for change, and also innovation, methodological and technological innovation with flexibility and adaptability to be able to promote solutions that truly have a significant impact. Thirdly, sustainability. Our goal, as we shall see during the explanation about W4P, we are based on aligning with each other to add efforts and accountability, monitoring, the assessment and accountability throughout our work. And what is this? The work we carry out at the International Department of the La Caixa Foundation. We work with alliances, we promote knowledge sharing and collaboration, not only from the European philanthropy, but from the global philanthropy through partnerships and participating in international philanthropy networks and fora, where we define strategies in the field of cooperation. Additionally, as many of you already know, we have four main action lines in which we define programs together with our partners. And basically, this could be mm, summarized as job creation for women and for young people. And we also work in the improvement of child survival. And for that, recently we had a presentation of the call for child survival. And I'm sure that some of you have participated in it, whose main goal is to struggle against children's mortality through programs that improve this mortality rate in African countries. But also we have a program for children's vaccination, which actually collects funds for the vaccination of children in mainly African countries. Thirdly, we have a line for the assistance of groups in emergency and humanitarian crisis situations. I'm sure that you all have heard about it. And the fourth line is the strengthening of Spanish, Portuguese, and local cooperation organizations. We work with them in all of our programs, and specifically, we try to be present in spaces and actions that lead to the improvement of cooperation of all actors, including the private sector. And now, very briefly, I'd like to introduce why the W4P program. Where does it come from? Back in 2017, why did we decide to launch this program? Very briefly, I'd like to say that 700 million people live on or less than 2.15 US dollars a day. Latin America is the most unequal region still nowadays, But Africa as well is the poorest continent. And as you know, we have as a priority country Libya. So 2 out of every 5 unemployed people are young people. And the main focus of W4P are young people and women. And 2 out of every 3 unemployed young people are women. And I'd like to say that in the program, since 2007 till 2015, although the International Cooperation Program started in 1997, from 2007 to 2015, we had the Socio-Economic Development Program, which is the precedent of W4P, in which we gave support to organizations, both Spanish and international, that had programs for job creation, economic development, and in countries of Africa and Latin America. And we managed it through a call. And we analyzed, after all of these years, back in 2015, analysis of which had been the impact of our cooperation, and we realized there were some strengths, like the reinforcement of organizations, of non-for-profit organizations. We contributed to promoting the action of all of the organizations. In addition, to us, it was very important because we accumulated experience in the socio-economic development area, and the program became a significant important it was a significant call for the sector, for organizations that have projects in this field. But we also realized that there was a significant geographic dispersion because it was quite an open call, and there was a very wide range of projects and types of projects, some of which were interconnected. And a lot of you started asking for resources to establish proactive listening processes. And we realized that was a crucial need, and that we also had to give support to the maximum number of actors in the ecosystem and agents in the ecosystem to start implementing changes. We also promoted the assessment of the projects, but always at the end of the project in order to define priorities. And there were models to be able to monitor in a continuous way the projects. And this took us to this dispersion I mentioned. This geographic dispersion implied difficulties to really measure the real impact of our collaboration. That's why we decided to launch the W4P program, a work for progress program, a program in which we're continuously cooperating with all of our partners. It is a program that has a work vision as a platform and not isolated projects. It promotes alliances, which represents much more than the sum of efforts. It's a reflection of how cooperation and shared values bring us to a vision to change reality. From the very onset, it has always been based on proactive listening, and we have placed the aspirations and needs of the community and co-creation. As I've said at the beginning, it is one of the tools that we believe is crucial for the empowerment of the communities. And therefore, this methodology not only belongs to the communities, but it also reminds us that the real change stems from this collaboration. The program has an innovative approach, as Martha shall explain, to cover needs and desires. And that's why it has evolved in time with the lessons learned, not only with grants and aid, but also with a measurement of the impact and with always a long-term vision and with the idea of adding on board new partners that help us introduce new transformation process. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to give the floor to my colleague Martha so that she presents the program. Thank you.
Bien, muchas gracias, Ariadna, y buenas
Thank
tardes
you,
a todos.
Ariadna. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning for those of you who are from Latin America.
¿Me oís bien?
Can you hear me well?
Perfectamente.
As Oh, excellent. Thank you. As Ariadna has just mentioned, many of you, and as many of you already know, W4P is a program that promotes innovation and quality employment, especially for women and young people who are in a vulnerable situation, especially in rural areas. And we do so through the promotion of platforms, multi-agent platforms, social innovation platforms, which are just organization networks, organizations that work in a well-coordinated way with a common focus, a common approach, which is based on the listening, the proactive listening of the needs, in the case of job creation or W4P, and the co-creation of solutions, which are built up jointly with the communities and also with the most relevant actors in the ecosystem, the mapping of the actors in the system is crucial for the W4P program. And these solutions, which in most cases are business plans for small companies that are started up within the framework of the program, but also services to strengthen the ecosystem for each one of the regions in which we work. Now, these solutions, as I'm telling you, are prototyped, first of all, at a small scale to study their feasibility. And we install the solutions, we choose the solutions that have the probability of higher success. We have highlighted this because even though all of the parts of the program are always open, we say that listening and co-creation are always open, but the program's focus currently is the assessment or evaluation or the generation. Monitoring and evaluation are also shared by W4P. We have a coordination and governance, a joint governance system. And in the case of W4P, it's an assessment, it's a continuous assessment, what we call an evolutionary assessment. We do not do it only at the end of the program, as mentioned beforehand by Ariadna, but we carry out this continuous assessment throughout the process in order to detect opportunities and or hurdles that do not allow us to make headway and to adapt the strategy to the environment. Because as you all know, all of you who are working on the field, we work in a very highly complex and ever-changing contexts, and we need to be flexible. And here at the La Caixa Foundation, as a private foundation, we believe this is a role we can play as a philanthropic organization to allow for this flexibility and the capacity to experiment. There should be some leeway for experimentation in order to test out the most fruitful and the most purposeful solutions. Very, very briefly. Oh, I've jumped over one slide. Sorry. So, as I was saying, in this slide, we show a bit the results of the program since its beginning. It was begun in India in 2017, and starting in 2018, we opened a call for Peru and Mozambique, and after 2023, also in Colombia. In this case, in Colombia, we are together with a Grupo Social group. We do it together with the program, and that's why we have a call hard. What we are calling the call today is for Mozambique and Peru and India. So in terms of the prototypes that have been tested out, the companies that have been created, jobs created, etc. And the program in time has accumulated some recognitions and which give us greater strength to keep on working on this methodology, which we see is truly working and it's truly having a real impact in the communities in which they are working. And at the same time, it generates knowledge that we're sharing. And the truth is that W4P is a program based on learning by doing. Amongst all of us, we learn together and we build up and we generate this knowledge that's so important to share. In terms of funds contribution, the Lacache Foundation has devoted more than 21 million euro since the beginning of the program in 2020, in 1997. But we would like also to highlight here the importance of co-funding. The W4P program has created a portfolio of initiatives that are job generating and that are working. Some of them are already thinking about getting profits. And the fact that we have this portfolio allows us to access co-funding funds. Oftentimes, the very entities that are part of W4P who access these funds through third-party calls, and we promote within the program this access to co-funding. And at the same time, we ask the different institutions and entities that are part of W4P, as you shall see in the call, that they also co-fund at least 20% with funds for the program. So far, it was 10%. One of the novelties this year is that we have raised it a bit, up to 20%. Co-funding brought forward by the organizations that present the proposals or other partner organizations. W4P, as we have said, is based on networks of entities. In this call, we have asked to have networks of between 3 and 5 entities, which may be led by a non-for-profit organization or a for-profit organization that specializes in financing and with a social interest, with a social focus, in order to have an impact. Within these networks of entities, we also ask them to present other typologies of entities, not only NGOs, but we should also have incubators, business nurseries, and accelerators. As I have said beforehand, we are within the phase of acceleration of the program, also universities, with regards to the generation of knowledge, public agents, private agents, and here we are starting to have some the benefit of hindsight, also the participation of entities from the financial organization. All of this network of entities, 52 are the main ones who are part of W4P. They create a community. They are part of a community that's interconnected. And amongst all of them, we are building up the program. The program, in terms of knowledge generation, implies, for example, the organization of an annual meeting with all of the entities that are part of W4P, and that's held in Barcelona in October. This year, it will be between the 7th and the 9th of October, where they exchange experiences, knowledge, and we have representatives from the program's advisory committee and other international experts through workshops and seminars. Okay, what are the action areas? The countries for this call are India, Mozambique, and Peru. And within these countries, we focus on some specific regions, the ones you see here in the 3 maps. Why do we have this approach? We have a geographic focus because we believe that in order to have a real factor and to real strengthening these ecosystems, we need to be for a long period in one single region. Ariana has mentioned at the beginning that one of the weaknesses we had spotted in the past was our geographic dispersion and to work as isolated silos without any connection. What we do at W4P is to focus on a specific region and to create these connections. And many of the questions that are asked in this call is whether within these countries we can open up a new region. Well, it is possible. I'm already getting ahead of myself. I know, but it is possible as long as there is some sort of a connection. The point is not to create a totally isolated initiative, but to create some connections. A good example of this is what has been done in Peru, where the program has some links with the capital city, Lima, in order to create connections with regards to the commercial side. Or in India, for example, we started the program in 2 areas of Uttar Pradesh, in eastern Uttar Pradesh, and Bundelkhand, and Rajasthan and Gujarat, replicating what had been done in the previous regions and connecting them through the most generic
Los
prototypes,
vehículos son de acceso
i.e.,
al
for
crédito, de
example,
refuerzo del sistema
accessing
financiero.
loans
Por lo tanto,
and the
estas
entrepreneurial
conexiones son
environment,
verdaderamente la base de
etc.
Work Progress y es
This
lo
is
que
the very
promovemos a través del
foundation of
programa y lo que
W4P, and this is
pedimos
what we promote through the
en esta
program and what
convocatoria.
we ask for in this
Desde
call.
el año pasado,
Since
la
last year,
convocatoria tiene dos
the
modalidades de
call has
financiación.
two
Están
funding
relacionadas con la
modes, which
estrategia de
are
inversión.
related
El abrir una segunda modalidad
to,
está relacionado con la
I mean,
estrategia de inversión de
opening a
impacto
second
del
funding
programa
mode is
y lo
related
que
to the
pretende
measurement
es
of the
acercar a los
impact in the
emprendedores a
program,
la cartera
which
de
wants to
emprendedores que se ha puesto
involve
en
in the
marcha
portfolio of
a través de Work
entrepreneurs we
Progress
started
a
at
darlos a
W4P
crédito, que puedan tener
to getting
acceso a
them closer
crédito.
to
Por eso
credit
tenemos dos
so that they can
modalidades. La
have access
primera, que
to
es la
loans.
de
That's why we
donación,
have two modes. The
es
first one is the
una modalidad que
donation-based
se basa en
mode
apoyar los
based
procesos
on
de
giving
innovación social que he
support
comentado,
to these
los procesos de
social
cambio, de
innovation
escucha, de
projects,
cooperación, de
mapping,
puesta en marcha de
listening,
nuevos
co-creation,
prototipos,
and
ya
the
sean de
starting
empresas
of two
sistémicos,
prototypes,
tecnológicos
business systemics and
y
technologic,
siempre enfocados en la
in
generación de
nature
empleo
always
o
focusing
la
on
aceleración
job
de los que ya
generation
están en
or
marcha. Esta sería la
the
modalidad
support of those
que
that
por
are
descontado
already up
reembolsable
and
y de
running.
donación.
So
Y luego la segunda
this would be
modalidad
based
es la
on
de
the
financiación no
donation mode.
reembolsable,
And the
que va
second one
dirigida
is
a promover el
through
acceso a
the
financiación
reimbursable
de las
loans, which
empresas
is
del ecosistema Work
for the
Progress,
funding
aquellas
of the
incubadas por el
companies
programa
of
y
the
otras empresas y
W4P ecosystem, those that are in
del ecosistema
incubators
que
of the
tienen una
program and
relación
that are
directa,
part of the ecosystem
promover
that
el
have a direct
acceso
relationship to
a
promote
financiación a través del
accessing
instrumento,
funding
del diseño de
through
instrumentos de
the
financiación.
design of
Esto es lo que
funding or
ahora nos
financial
detallará más en
instruments. This is
detalle
what we will
Laura
hear
Fernández.
from
La
Laura
idea con
Fernandez
estas
next.
dos
The idea
modalidades,
with these two
como
modes,
digo,
these
es
two
seguir, por
funding
una parte,
modes, is to
fortaleciendo el
have, on the one hand, to
ecosistema,
strengthen the
generando
ecosystem
nuevos
by generating
prototipos de empresa y, por
new
otra,
business
acercar a estas
prototypes, and on the other
empresas
hand,
al
to get
crédito.
these
Muchas de
businesses
estas empresas a
closer
lo largo
to
de todo este tiempo hemos visto que
funding
tienen muchas
sources, to
dificultades para
loans.
acceder
There are
a
many
crédito.
companies
Muchas
that have
veces para ellos va a
very
ser la
big
primera vez que
difficulties to
acceden, no
accessing
disponen de un
credit. And the first time
currículum
they access
crediticio,
it,
un
they do not
historial
have
crediticio,
a
con lo cual
credit
creemos que
background or
romper
a credit CV.
estas
And we
barreras,
need to break
¿no?,
up
es muy
that hurdle,
importante
that
para
barrier,
seguir
in
avanzando.
order to keep on
Ahora
making
voy a
headway.
pasar,
And now I'm going
perdona,
to,
aquí
oh,
tenía
sorry,
más información del por qué,
I
¿no?,
had a bit more
esa
information about
inversión de impacto, lo que estaba
why
diciendo, ¿no?,
this
esa necesidad
investment
de financiamiento
impact,
de las empresas
that
incubadas
why
por
this impact
Work
investment
Progress. Y aquí una vez más, ¿no?,
at
¿cuál es el
W4P.
rol
Once
de
again
la
here,
Acción La Caixa?
what's the role
Aportar un
played by the La
capital de
Caixa Foundation?
referencia
Well,
analítico
to
para animar
provide
a
some
entidades
catalytic capital
financieras
to
locales
encourage
a diseñar estos
local
vehículos de
financial
financiación, ¿no?
entities
Estos vehículos que permitan
to
la
create the
financiación
vehicles, the funding
a
vehicles
colectivos
that
que
will allow us
normalmente
to
no lo
fund
hacen.
groups that
No
are
buscamos un
not normally
beneficio
funded. We're not
económico,
looking
pero sí que
for financial
buscamos
profit.
recuperar
What we're
parte de
looking
los
to is to
fondos para
recover
poder
part of our funds
reinvertirlos
in
en el
order to be able to
crecimiento.
reinvest them in the
Y ahora sí,
program
le voy a
itself.
pasar
And
la
now,
palabra
yes,
a Laura
I'm going to give
Fernández,
the
que nos
floor
va
to
a dar
Laura
más
Fernandez,
detalles de
who
esta
will give us
modalidad de
greater
inversión.
detail and color about these two funding modes. Thank you.
Hola, buenos días.
Hello, good
Buenos días a los
morning.
latinos. Buenas
For
tardes
those
para
of you who are
todos.
in Latin America, and good
Gracias,
afternoon for
Marta.
the rest
Gracias,
of the
Ariadna.
world. Thank you, Martha. Thank you,
Bueno, os comento un
Ariadna.
poquito de la
Well, let me tell
modalidad
you a bit about
reembolsable
the
que está
reimbursable
en esta
mode,
convocatoria que
which is
tiene que
part
ver
of this
con esta
call,
estrategia de inversión de
which is
impacto que ha
related to
comentado
this
Marta con el
impact
afán
investment strategy
de
mentioned by
que
Martha.
la convocatoria de la Caixa sea
And the La Caixa
un actor
Foundation's call,
catalítico, ¿no?, de estas,
well, the La
para
Caixa
cerrar
Foundation
las brechas de
becomes a
financiación que nos
catalytic
hemos encontrado
agent
en los
in order
territorios
to close
de
the gap
trabajo de
that we
Work
have
for
found
Progress, ¿no?
in the
En
W4P
tal
working
sentido,
territories.
plantear que hay
From that
dos
point of
perfiles
view,
o que hemos
okay,
identificado
I'll
dos
say that there are
perfiles
two profiles. We have
de empresas a las que se
defined
dirigen
two
atender,
business
diferentes
profiles
empresas,
that we want to care
organizaciones,
for.
asociaciones,
Well, businesses,
o
associations, or
cooperativas,
organizations,
donde por un lado
cooperatives.
están
On the
las
one hand,
MIPYMES de
we have
impacto, que son
the
aquellas más pequeñas, prototipos que
MIP,
están
impact MSMEs.
en
I
desarrollo
mean,
o
the
están
ones that are
vinculadas, son
in
proveedores
development,
o productores que están
suppliers,
vinculados
or producers who are
a
linked
prototipos
to
o otras empresas
prototypes
agregadoras, ¿no?
or
Y ahora lo
other
que nos hemos encontrado es que tienen una
aggregating
necesidad
companies.
de
They
financiación, están en
have
unas
some
brechas
funding
de
needs
una
that
financiación
are,
menor que
they
puede
have a
llegar hasta
lower funding need, which can go up to 15,000 euro, but normally they are between 2,000 and 3,000. And of course, they have also working capital needs, but in some cases, the purchase of certain types of assets. On the other hand, we have the SME aggregators or ecosystem drivers based on prototypes that have already been developed as an initiative and they have been chaining them up, or entities, companies that are part of the W4P environment, and they are actually pushing all of the rest. What we find in this case is that the funding needs can go up to 100,000 euro, but the average is between 20 and 30,000 euro, with working capital needs as well, but in many cases with investment needs in assets or in projects or infrastructures for the very same projects. So let's go to the next slide. Here we talk about a funding scheme. We distinguish between the scheme and the direct instrument. Now, these terms have been chosen specifically to keep some flexibility when it comes for the leading entities to present your application to adapt in the best possible way to the needs you have. We want to understand the rationale of how it will be organized, which will be the components. We have thought about up to 3 components, but you do not need to have all of them. And it doesn't need to be a new vehicle. It could be a structure that already exists. And that's why we presented it in a flexible way. But we do need to understand how it will be organized. How will you receive the funds? How will you organize them and manage them? That's what we call the rationale and the scheme, the funding scheme strategy. On the other hand, the direct funding instrument is which would be that instrument? Is it a loan? Is it a financial product that will be used to close that funding gap for these profile goals, the micro SMEs, as we called, or the drivers, as we call them, which we believe have different needs, and therefore they also need different instruments. This case, on this slide, as you can see, if we go from left to right, we see this flow, how the resources from La Caixa flow, with this double-fold intention. Reimbursable, on the one hand, reimbursable funds that go to the credit part. We suggest 75% approximately of the funds that have been asked for, and the other part should be like non-reimbursable resources to give support to the strategy and all of the rationale for an impact investment. The leading entity should actually compose this. There will be a revolving fund or a credit fund or some sort of a management for the placement of these loans. And on the other hand, management costs, etc. We could even have, and we're open to this, a number of incentives based on results, something that can be used as an incentive for the entity to get into a market in which they are not yet present, and also a very beneficial fund to have a technical assistance fund and a strategy for intervention fund. And if we go to the right-hand side, we have these direct loans or these technical assistance for the entities. And as you can see, we distinguish between the micro SMEs on a mode X and other entities that are a segment that we have called lean, which is a totally different reality given their credit mode. Let me repeat. You have to tell us how that scheme will be, what's the intervention rationale, what credentials, what experience do you need to create this scheme, and what is the understanding? You have to tell us in depth what's the understanding of this target population of the beneficiaries and which will be the gaps that we will need to cover and how we will care for them. So that's the rationale we expect from you. That's what I wanted to share with you. And the next slide gets a bit more into the detail of it. Martha, please, next slide. Right. Okay, here we get into the depth of what we expect. If we zoom in into the scheme, here we think about the potential components of the scheme. Let me repeat, we do not need to have them all. They can be created ad hoc based on the reality and based on your experience and the reality above all that you're covering. In the case of credit funds, we want them to be funds to deploy this direct funding instrument, and we need to understand well the reality of the beneficiaries. You need to send us information, historical information, and technical information about the reality of the beneficiaries and why they are presenting one product and not the other one, which conditions, what are the terms and conditions of the product they are presenting. The more they define it, the better will be our understanding of it, and we will be able to place that catalytic role much better. The same thing can be said about the risk coverage. We can take into account elements or instruments for the coverage, for risk coverage with this catalytic capital. But if you present that, it must be very clear in the why and the how. And I say the why and the how because I'm sure you will have made an analysis, a historical and technical analysis about what's the likelihood that these entities fall and about their experience. So to count on this information is very useful to be able to approach these coverage schemes. Now, the second box refers to costs. So what we recommend is that it should be 50-50. I mean, we should not cover more than 50 for the leading entities to be involved as well. But because what we're looking for with this catalytic money is to start these impact investment phases and to subsidize part of the activities, but as a learning process and to generate an experience in which we can all learn and define the foundations for this product and for this scheme to be feasible and sustainable in the future. That's why we can't cover 100% of the costs, but we're looking for a financial feasibility and a financial sustainability. And finally, the technical assistance. Let me repeat again. Let me insist on this. It's very important, in our opinion, that there be a good coordination between accessing funding and technical assistance. It can be an intervention in itself, but very important in the network with which the other agents are working in the network. Those of us who have worked in the previous call last year, we have promoted this, the work of the leaders with their allies for the deployment of this strategy and with the other agents in the network to generate a continuum of support for the entities, for the beneficiaries, and for the micro SMEs, and for the driving businesses to follow the rationale that closes all of the gaps and that are interconnected with initiatives that are purely based on donations. And the co-funding, which is what Martha mentioned beforehand. In this case, it's also highly relevant to count on co-funding, not only for technical assistance, but also for for the credit part, for the revolving credit part. And to think about which will be the intervention strategy and the recovery of this fund through some projections and through financial planning. And we'll see how the funding will be actually supported by La Caixa, not only, but also by the whole structure. And I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to give the floor now to Laura Aldapo, who will get more into some criteria issues. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Laura, thank you. Martha, thank you, Ariadna. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending this information session this afternoon. As Laura has just said, now we will focus a bit more on the practical side of the goal. We will start talking about the requirements for the leading entity to be able to be considered as a leading entity. For the donation mode, it is very important that it's a non-for-profit organization, that it has an updated audit. This is a document that we can ask for at any moment in the application process or once it has been selected. It's very important to have an updated audit report. It's also very important to have a minimum experience of 5 years working in job creation, international cooperation, and/or in innovation. And in the network, there should be at least one local entity. The network should be composed between 3 and 5 entities, and one of them should at least be local. Now, with regards to the reimbursable mode, the reimbursable funding mode, the leading entity can be for profit as long as it has a social focus. And it should also have an updated audit report. And it should also demonstrate that it has a 5-year minimum experience. And they should also show that they have actually managed experiences with an impact investment, and there should also be at least one local entity. Thank you, Martha. What are the selection criteria for the assessment of the proposals? The selection criteria are the ones we see on screen now. As Martha has just mentioned at the beginning, it's very important that the proposals are well coordinated and complementary with W4P stakeholders. That's a great priority for the program in order to promote local work, as Martha has said. In addition, additionally, the proposals that are presented must be multi-agent and multi-variable solutions. And the networks that present proposals must be composed by between 3 and 5 entities, and you can also have other agents, not only the entities that are part of the network, but there could also be other entities that make contributions. It's also very important to involve in the implementation of the project the vulnerable sectors of these populations, or the target populations, because we want to empower the most vulnerable sectors of the areas in which we work. And it is highly relevant for them to participate from the very onset, from the beginning of the proposal. The proposal must also include innovative elements, innovative methodologies, as Martha mentioned, for W4P in general, but also other innovative elements will be highly valued. And a very important point for the areas in which we work at W4P is that these proposals look for mitigation and/or the adaptation of the communities to climate change. The proposals must be feasible from a financial and economic point of view to generate development of the prototypes that will be suggested or proposed. And for that, it is very important that they have a relationship, that they be related to the production or value chains at a local level to make sure that there is a connection with the work that's already being carried out. And in addition, it increases the potential to enter markets, real already existing markets, which will also be a very highly valued point. As mentioned, it's very important to have collaboration and cooperation with the actors that are part of the W4P program. And that's why the proposals that have as a goal to increase these relationships, not only in terms of quantity, but also the quality of these relationships, they will be highly valued. And the main goal is to generate a positive impact in the regions in which they will be executed and implemented. Now, these selection criteria will be assessed and they will be considered in the e-assessment process that will be divided up into 4 main phases. Initially, the proposals or applications will be assessed by 3 experts, 2 of whom will be experts in international cooperation and will be a local person from the country that has knowledge about the W4P program and its connections and the prototypes that are already on the way. Once this assessment phase is over, an external committee will review the conclusions and the assessment made by these first 3 experts, and next this review will be validated by the governance bodies of the La Caixa Foundation. And finally, there is a possibility, although it doesn't necessarily happen with all proposals, we could have potential interviews with the entities that present these proposals in case there was any doubt for the resolution and clarification or of any question that may have come up during the assessment process. All of these processes, next slide, Martha, please. All of these processes we have mentioned here today will be carried out throughout the calendar you can see on screen. As you all know, the call started last Tuesday on the 6th of June, and it will be an open call till the 3rd of June. Once we have the call, we will start with the assessment process I've just mentioned, which will be carried out in June and July, so that in September we'll be able to announce the resolution of the call. In September, the entities that have been pre-selected will receive a message through the applications platform, and at the same time, the entities that have been left out of the selection process will also receive a message. For the pre-selected entities, we start having the legal period in which they will need to present all of the documents presented in the conditions, the terms and conditions. And after that, once we have confirmed this process, we will start with the signature of the collaboration agreements. Once the projects start, if the proposals are approved according to the agreement, well, you can start with the projects. And after 6 months, the entities will need to present a narrative report and a financial report through the platform. And at the end of the project, the financial report will need to be presented after 1 year. And at the end of the project, we will have the project's audit report and an evaluation and a final report. Now, with all of these details, let me show on screen, we will leave on screen all of the useful email addresses where you can send any questions or any clarification, or if you have any queries. Anything that has not been made clear in this session, you can send your questions and we will answer them. And now let's have a short Q&A session. I'd like to say that the questions that have been solved during today's session or that maybe are part of the basis, we will not take them, given that we have a limited amount of time in this session. Okay, let me read the questions, Martha and Laura. Okay, I'll tell you who the questions are for. To start, let me remind you that today's session will be is being registered, both the audio and the video. So this presentation will be uploaded, and you can see it again or as many times as you want. And if you want to ask us, if you want to see it, ask us for the link, and we will share the link to see this video without any problems. One of the questions that has been mentioned in different instances, Martha, is with regards to the United Nations agencies. This year, are they eligible to be leading entities or to be members of the network? Well, they will need to fulfill the same compliance requirements as any other entity. Well, this year, one of the changes we have had compared to previous years in this call is that we have suppressed a restriction we had for the United Nations agencies to apply, responding a bit to the aid crisis that they are undergoing. So now these United Nations agencies can apply, and the program above all looks to connect with the local world, with the local organizations. So the applications and proposals you make must make very clear the value added they contribute in their proposal, and this connections with the local ecosystem. It is true that the La Caixa Foundation has some compliance criteria that clearly they will need to follow, just like any other entity. Thank you. Thank you, Martha, for that answer. Another question that has been mentioned is how can we show this coordination with the agents that are already up and running in the W4P program? Well, in the proposals, you can present specific initiative actions or specific proposals about how we could start with the prototypes. In the basis of the call, the appendices, and on our website, which is also being shared here, there is complementary information about each one of the countries. There is a deployment of the main prototypes that have been started, so that the participating entities, especially the ones that participate for the first time, so that they can see what has been done in each one of the countries. So what we ask you to do in this call is to show how, with your proposals, you may contribute to strengthening this ecosystem. So in the proposal, in the application, you can explain how, in general terms, through this approach of listening, co-creation, and prototyping, you can contribute to accelerating or to designing new initiatives, and you can give some specific examples about how that would be linked up. Create connections, for example, accessing loans or designing in prototypes or in the value chain, for example, initiatives that have a trading connection to widen value chains to improve all of the ecosystem. There are many ways of doing it. What's very important is to leave it very clear so that it is well explained, so that the external committee and the external evaluator can understand it well. Thank you, Martha. There is a question about presenting more than one proposal. We have talked about this during the presentation, but entities as leading entities, they can present one proposal in both modes. A leading entity could present a proposal in mode A, donation, and one proposal in mode B, reimbursable funding. But you can be a leading entity for one proposal and for the other. Let's see. You will see this on the terms and conditions. If the same entity presents an application in mode A and mode B, there must be a strategic connection between both of them. There shouldn't be a duplicity of activities. Perfect. There's a question about whether you could specify a bit more how co-funding works. The co-funding of the entities that are part of this networks, or could it be external co-funding? In the terms and conditions, we say that this co-funding could come from the leading entities, the partner entities, or third parties, which can be unitary, like it could be in nature, but it can be monetized. It should be monetized. It should be quantified in money terms. Excellent, thank you. And now, there is another question in the chat box. In general, I mean, the form to apply can be found in the application link that you see on screen. You cannot make headway with regards to the application if you do not go through the first phases. That's why in the link on the main page of the call, which is also on screen, we have presented the questions of the form for you to consult it without needing to fill up this first lid. And you can present the application without going through the whole process. It is important, even though the questions have been uploaded, we say it based on the benefit of hindsight. You should start as soon as possible the crediting process in the call platform, especially if you come here for the first time, because it takes a few days. So you should start that as soon as possible to get your accreditation in the platform and to start the process, because if not, everything accumulates at the end, and sometimes it's very hard to manage any doubts that may come up. We are also asked about the networks specified in the terms and conditions. What you said, Martha, about the complementary information, the supplementary information we have in the active networks in each country. We're asked about whether it's the current one, it's a historical record, or will they still be active throughout this year? Right, they are the current ones. It is a current snapshot of the portfolio and the partners we have. Okay, there is another question here about all of this. Okay, these are the networks with which you will need to articulate yourselves and with others. The prototypes and the new proposals should be connected to this. And we have just mentioned, the organizations cannot present more than one project per mode. In other words, if one entity leads and presents one project in Mozambique, it will not be able to present, it will not be able to apply in another country. Having said that, I believe that we do not have any further questions that have not been already answered. Oh, there's a new one. There's a new one, he said. Okay, the co-creation and listening phases are covered with the La Caixa Foundation's funds. Yes, listening and co-creation are an inherent part of this methodology of W4P, and it is one. I mean, these phases are funded by the La Caixa Foundation, and it is exactly one of the weak points that we spotted, as Ariadna explained at the beginning, that happened in many calls. The organizations change their diagnosis, but very few funders are giving them support from that point of view. So that those diagnoses were carried out with bibliographical information. So what we're asking you to do is that they should be based on an in-depth listening phase to know exactly what the situation, what are the needs, and what are the challenges. And these phases are funded indeed by the La Caixa Foundation as part of the project. And we have one last question with regards to the action areas and the implementation of the programs. We are asked whether we can present a proposal that's implemented in an area that's neighboring the ones that are already part of it. Martha, well, as we have said already, it is possible, and in fact, this has been the case in India. But what we ask you to do is to have a connection. It should not be a proposal that's totally isolated. You can present it, but it is true that the assessing committee will give it a lower score compared to other proposals that do show there is an interconnection. Okay, so with that, we have answered all of the questions we had on the chat box, and the time is up for this session. So, if there are no further questions, I'd like to thank you all for having attended this information session. And let me remind you that you have on screen the email address to answer any questions you may have or that we have not answered here today, and to have all of the information about the call. Thank you, Laura. Thank you all. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you, and have a very good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Thank you.